I never thought someone I loved would see me as a project rather than a partner. Growing up in a blue-collar family in Michigan, I worked hard to become a software developer in Silicon Valley. When I met Amanda Morris at a tech mixer, I was captivated by her intelligence and warmth. The daughter of tech executive Jackson Morris, she seemed to appreciate my drive despite our different backgrounds. For 18 months, I believed we were building something real. Then I discovered the group chats where she called me her charity case. Before I reveal how I discovered Amanda's betrayal, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever been blindsided by someone you trusted. The night I met Amanda still feels vivid in my memory. It was at the annual Silicon Valley Tech Summit afterparty, held at the Redwood Lounge overlooking the San Francisco skyline. I was there representing my small but growing development team nursing a scotch while trying to work up the courage to network. Amanda approached me first, commenting on the app project I had mentioned during the panel discussion earlier that day. There was something refreshingly direct about her. While most people at these events spoke in rehearsed elevator pitches, Amanda asked thoughtful questions about the accessibility features I had built into the application. We ended up talking for hours long after most attendees had moved on to other conversations or left entirely. I learned she came from the Morris family, as in Jackson Morris of Pinnacle Tech Solutions, a company valued at billions. When she mentioned her father was the CEO, I nearly spilled my drink. Everyone in tech knew the Morris name. But Amanda seemed almost embarrassed by the connection, quickly steering the conversation back to my work. We exchanged numbers that night, and to my surprise, she texted the very next day. Our first official date was at a small ramen shop in Mountain View, the kind of place where you sit at communal tables on plastic stools. I had suggested it, thinking it was unique, only to realize later that someone like Amanda might expect something more upscale. When I apologized for not taking her somewhere fancier, she touched my hand and said, "I appreciate places with soul. That fancy stuff is my everyday." This is much more interesting. I told her about growing up in Detroit, my dad working for 30 years at the auto plant before it closed, my mom taking on extra shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. I explained how I taught myself coding through library books and free online courses, working retail jobs to save enough for community college classes. Amanda listened with genuine interest, not the polite nodding that often masks boredom. She shared stories about the pressure of growing up as an heiress to a tech empire, how her father expected perfection in everything, and how she had rebelled by getting a degree in environmental science instead of business or computer engineering. Our backgrounds could not have been more different, but we found common ground in our love for classic science fiction novels, hiking trails nobody else seemed to know about, and developing theories about who would ultimately win in the TV shows we both followed. 3 months into our relationship, Amanda invited me to Sunday dinner at her family estate in Atherton. Driving my weathered Toyota through the neighborhood of mansions made my stomach knot with anxiety. The Morris estate was behind a gate with meticulously landscaped grounds and a house that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. Jackson Morris greeted me with a firm handshake and evaluating eyes. He was tall, silver-haired, and exuded the confidence of someone who had never worried about a bill in his life. "So, Zachary, Amanda tells me you work in app development," he said, pronouncing it like it was a hobby rather than a career. "Yes, sir. My team just secured funding for our accessibility platform." Jackson nodded. "Small startups can be a good training ground. When you are ready for something more substantial, let me know. Always looking for talent at Pinnacle." I felt the implied judgment in his tone, the assumption that my work was insignificant compared to his empire. Amanda jumped in. "Dad Zach turned down acquisition offers because he believes in keeping the platform independent and affordable for small businesses." Her mother Elaine, a graceful woman with kind eyes, steered the conversation to less loaded territory. "Zachary, Amanda mentioned you make amazing lasagna. You must share your secret." The evening proceeded with subtle class markers I could not miss. References to boarding schools, vacation properties, and family friends in positions of power. Yet Elaine seemed to appreciate my stories about community college adventures and the DIY renovation of my first apartment. She laughed genuinely when I described accidentally painting myself into a corner and having to leap to freedom. It was the first time anyone had given me a genuine smile all evening. As our relationship deepened, Amanda and I decided to move in together. She found an upscale apartment in Palo Alto with floor-to-ceiling windows and a rooftop pool. When we discussed finances, she insisted on paying 60% of the rent since she wanted certain luxury amenities. I make more than enough to split it evenly, I protested. But this place was my choice, she countered, and you are putting so much back into your business. It makes sense this way. I reluctantly agreed, not realizing this would become a recurring dynamic. Her generosity increasingly feeling like charity rather than partnership. 8 months into our relationship, I was fully integrated into Amanda's social circle. Her close friends included Catherine, a marketing executive at a fashion startup, Jessica, who managed her family's foundation, Thomas, a venture capitalist, and Andrew, who had attended the same Swiss boarding school as Amanda, and now worked at her father's company. They were all welcoming enough on the surface, making sure to include me in gatherings and trips. Yet there were moments when I caught exchanged glances after I spoke or noticed conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. One night, at a dinner party at Thomas's Nob Hill apartment, I overheard Catherine ask Amanda, "Is he settling in?" "Okay," in a tone one might use about a rescue animal. Amanda replied, "He is adaptable. You should have seen how quickly he learned which fork to use at Castello di Amorosa." They both laughed, and I pretended not to have heard when I approached with drinks. At the time, I convinced myself it was harmless, that they were acknowledging my adjustment to their world without malice. For 6 months, I believed we were happy. I was working hard on growing my business, while Amanda had taken a position at an environmental consulting firm, refusing her father's repeated offers to create a position for her at Pinnacle. We traveled to Lake Tahoe with her friends, hosted dinner parties in our apartment, and began tentatively discussing a future together. I was in love, and I thought Amanda was too. But beneath the surface, something very different was happening. The first hint that something was off came on an ordinary Tuesday. Amanda had left her phone on the kitchen counter while showering, and a notification lit up the screen. It was from the group chat she had with her close friends, and just the preview was visible. "Catherine, how is the charity project going? Any progress?" When Amanda emerged from the bathroom, I asked her casually about it. "Oh," she laughed, looking momentarily flustered. "We are planning a fundraiser for underprivileged kids. Catherine always calls it that because she thinks it sounds funny." It seemed a plausible explanation, and I felt guilty for my flash of suspicion. Amanda had never given me reason to doubt her before, but something about her too quick response planted a seed of unease I could not shake. In the following weeks, I began noticing patterns I had previously overlooked or dismissed. At social gatherings, Amanda's friends would exchange knowing looks when I talked about my family or my upbringing. There were inside jokes that seemed to evaporate when I approached, followed by awkward transitions to new topics. Amanda herself began making more comments about my clothes, suggesting designer brands to replace my department store wardrobe. "This button-down would look so much better if it was tailored properly," she would say, tugging at my sleeve. "Or maybe we should work on updating your speech patterns for client meetings. Sometimes your Midwest shows a little too much." Each comment delivered with a smile and prefaced with "I love you," but chipped away at my confidence. I began second-guessing myself, wondering if I really needed to change to fit into her world. I started dressing differently, monitoring my accent, even adjusting the way I told stories about my past. Looking back, I was erasing myself to become the person I thought she wanted me to be. 3 months after the first notification incident, I received exciting news. My company had secured a major client, a national nonprofit that wanted to implement our accessibility platform across their entire organization. This contract would double our revenue and validate everything I had been working toward. I decided to surprise Amanda with a celebration. I picked up champagne ordered from her favorite restaurant and left work early to set everything up. Our apartment had keyless entry, so I was able to slip in quietly, planning to arrange everything before she got home from her usual Tuesday yoga class. As I placed the champagne in the refrigerator, I heard Amanda's voice coming from the bedroom. She had apparently skipped yoga that day. I was about to call out when I realized she was on a video chat, her voice carrying clearly through the partially open door. "I know, right? He was so excited about this contract. You would think he had just been named to the Fortune 500, she was saying, followed by laughter. I froze, champagne still in hand. Another voice, which I recognized as Catherine's, responded, "Well, for someone from his background, I guess it is a big deal." Amanda's voice again. "Dad says the contract would barely qualify as a rounding error on Pinnacle's quarterly statement. But I have to act like it is the most impressive thing ever." "Is the charity case project getting exhausting?" This was Thomas's voice. Sometimes. I mean, he is sweet, and he tries so hard. But the other day he pronounced sommelier as sommelier, and I nearly died. Jessica and I had to go to the bathroom so I could laugh. My blood turned to ice as I stood there, champagne forgotten in my hand. Charity case. The notification I had seen months ago suddenly made horrifying sense. I have to admit, Thomas continued, when you first started dating him, we thought it was just one of your rebellion phases. Stick it to daddy by dating someone from the wrong side of the tracks. Amanda's laugh was light and casual. Honestly, that might have been part of it initially. But then I got invested in the project. Like, could I actually help him become someone who could fit in our world? He has got potential. Just needs a lot of refining. It took every ounce of self-control not to confront her right then. But some survival instinct told me to gather more information first. I silently placed the champagne on the counter and left the apartment, texting her that I would be working late due to a project emergency. That night, after Amanda had fallen asleep, I did something I had never done before and have never done since. I accessed her laptop, which she had left open and unlocked on the coffee table. My hands shook as I opened her messages already, knowing what I would find, but needing to see the full extent of the betrayal. The group chat, titled "The Charity Project," contained months of conversations. Amanda sharing private details about our relationship, her friends mocking my background, my career, even my family. Screenshots of texts I had sent her analyzed and ridiculed. Photos of me at events with critiques of my clothing, my posture, my interactions with others. Most devastating were the messages from Jackson Morris to his daughter Amanda. This experiment has gone on long enough. He seems like a decent young man, but you need someone suitable for your position. The Harrison boy is back from London and asked about you. To which Amanda had replied, "Just a few more months, Dad. I am making progress with him. Besides, William Harrison is boring and has never had to work for anything. At least Zach has drive." Her father's response, "Drive does not replace breeding honey. Some differences cannot be overcome." I sat in the dark living room until dawn, scrolling through months of mockery and condescension. Every memory of our relationship was now tainted, recontextualized as a social experiment rather than a genuine connection. When Amanda woke and found me sitting in the living room, laptop open to the group chat, the color drained from her face. "Zach, I can explain," she began. "Explain what?" "That I have been your charity case for our entire relationship. That you and your friends have been laughing at me behind my back. That your father thinks I lack breeding." Her eyes filled with tears. "It was not like that at the beginning. I really do care about you. You care about me like someone cares about a stray dog they have taken in," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "Not as an equal, not as a partner." "Those messages do not represent how I feel," she insisted. "It was just stupid talk with friends." I scrolled to a recent message where she had written, "Sometimes I think about what our kids would look like and get nervous. My genes better be dominant, or my mother will never forgive me." This was 2 days after we had talked about our future together. 2 days after she had looked into my eyes and said she could imagine us building a life together. "You were not supposed to see those," she said, tears streaming down her face. That was the moment I knew it was truly over. Not "I did not mean those things," or "those messages do not reflect how I feel." Just "you were not supposed to see those." I packed my essential belongings that morning and left the apartment we had shared for nearly a year. The charity project had been terminated. The following weeks were the darkest of my life. I moved into a studio apartment I could barely afford, threw myself into work during the day, and stared at the ceiling most nights, replaying every moment of our relationship through this new lens of betrayal. Amanda called and texted constantly at first. Her messages oscillated between angry accusations about invading her privacy and tearful apologies, claiming the group chat was just a stupid joke that got out of hand. When I did not respond, her tone shifted to concern that I was acting unstable. Soon I began hearing from mutual acquaintances that Amanda was sharing a different version of our breakup. According to her, I had become paranoid and controlling, reading innocent messages out of context and blowing them out of proportion. At a tech networking event I had been looking forward to for months, several potential investors suddenly became cold when I approached them. One finally told me privately, "I would love to hear more about your platform, but I cannot afford to get on the wrong side of Jackson Morris." That was when I realized the full extent of what I was up against. Amanda's family was not just wealthy, they were influential in exactly the circles where I needed to build connections. Her father had apparently decided I was a threat to his daughter's reputation and was using his considerable influence to isolate me professionally. Job referrals dried up. Invitations to industry events stopped coming. Former contacts suddenly became too busy to meet. The Morris family was sending a clear message: disappear quietly or face the consequences. For almost a month, I tried to take the high road. I told no one, except my closest friend from home, about what had really happened. I focused on the clients I already had, working twice as hard to deliver exceptional results. I convinced myself that success would be the best revenge. Then I received a text from a developer I had met only once at a conference. "Dude, is this you?" they are talking about, with a link to a private tech forum where Amanda's friend Thomas had posted a warning about working with me. The post claimed I was difficult, unstable, and had harassed Amanda after she ended our relationship. Something inside me snapped. The high road had led straight into an ambush. If they were going to destroy my reputation with lies, I would defend myself with truth. I still had the screenshots from that night in our apartment. Dozens of messages that revealed exactly who Amanda and her friends really were. I had not looked at them since the breakup, finding them too painful. But now I reviewed them carefully, selecting ones that showed the pattern of mockery and classism, without including anything that could be considered too private or explicit. I created a simple post on my professional social media account. Recently, rumors have been circulated about me that are damaging my professional reputation. Rather than engage in a war of words, I am sharing these screenshots of conversations about me that have been going on for months behind my back. I leave it to you to judge who is being truthful. I have always believed that character speaks for itself. I attached the most damning screenshots, including ones where Amanda explicitly called me her charity case, where her father dismissed me for lacking breeding, and where her friends mocked my background and career achievements. I made sure to redact any truly personal information, leaving only the parts relevant to their systematic mockery. Within hours, the post had spread throughout our interconnected tech community. People I had never met were reaching out with messages of support and sharing similar experiences with the Morris family and their social circle. The carefully cultivated image of Amanda as a progressive, down-to-earth environmentalist and her father as a mentor to up-and-coming tech talent was cracking under the weight of their own words. Amanda called me in a panic. "Take it down now," she demanded, her voice shrill. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" I shared the truth. I replied calmly. "Something you should have tried. My father will destroy you," she threatened. "You have no idea who you are messing with." The next day, a courier delivered a cease and desist letter from Morris Legal Partners demanding I remove the post immediately and sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding my relationship with Amanda. The letter hinted at defamation claims, invasion of privacy, and various other legal threats. I scraped together enough money for a consultation with an attorney who reviewed the letter and the screenshots. "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation," he told me. "You shared their actual words without commentary. As for invasion of privacy, it gets murky since you had access to the computer with her permission as a cohabitant. They are hoping to intimidate you because they have more resources, but they have a weak case." Still, he advised that fighting would be expensive and draining. Their strategy would be to bury me in legal costs I could not afford, regardless of the merits of their case. I thanked him for his honesty, but decided the post would stay up. Some principles were worth fighting for, even at great cost. 3 days later, my boss called me into his office looking uncomfortable. "Zach, I think you are one of our most talented developers," he began, which I immediately recognized as preamble to bad news. "But we have received some concerns from clients about the public nature of your personal disputes. I am being fired because of the Morris family," I stated flatly. He would not meet my eyes. "We are not firing you. We are putting you on paid leave while things cool down. It is just business. Nothing personal." But it was personal. Very personal. That evening I received a call from a number I did not recognize. It was Jackson Morris himself. "Mr. Warner," he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. I understand you are currently on leave from your position. Perhaps we can find a mutually beneficial resolution. The offer was simple. Take down the post, sign the NDA, and in return, he would make a few calls to ensure I found a suitable new position at a company far from Silicon Valley. He would also refrain from pursuing legal action. I very nearly accepted. My bank account was dwindling, my professional reputation under attack, and the prospect of starting over somewhere new had a certain appeal. The fight was taking a toll on my mental health, and the simplest path was to surrender. I asked for 24 hours to consider the offer. That night was another sleepless one as I weighed my options. By morning I had made my decision. I would not be bullied into silence. When I called to decline his offer, Jackson Morris did not raise his voice or make additional threats. He simply said, "Very disappointing," before hanging up. Somehow his calm certainty was more terrifying than any shouting would have been. I was alone, unemployed, and facing the wrath of one of the most powerful families in tech. But for the first time since discovering those messages, I felt a flicker of pride returning. I was standing up for myself, refusing to be erased or silenced. What I did not realize then was that the tide was already turning in ways I could not have anticipated. The morning after I rejected Jackson Morris's offer, I received an email from someone named Lauren Chen, a senior executive at Horizon Technologies, one of Pinnacle's main competitors. "Zachary, your post has been making the rounds, and your former colleague Miguel speaks very highly of your work. I would like to discuss a potential position with our accessibility initiative. Are you free for coffee this week?" Miguel had been a colleague who left our company 6 months earlier to join Horizon. I had not even realized he had seen my post. The coffee meeting turned into a job interview, and by the end of the week, I had an offer for a senior developer position with a substantial salary increase. Lauren was refreshingly direct about the situation. Look, I would be lying if I said the Morris situation was not a factor, she admitted. Jackson has made a lot of enemies over the years with his business tactics, and there are plenty of people in this industry who would not mind seeing him face some consequences. But this offer is about your talent. Miguel showed me your accessibility platform, and it aligns perfectly with a project we have been wanting to develop. I accepted the position, still somewhat wary that it might be revoked if the Morris family applied enough pressure. But Horizon was large enough to withstand such influence, and Lauren assured me the company's board fully backed the decision. Meanwhile, my post continued to gain traction. A popular anonymous tech blog published an article titled "The Charity Case Class Warfare and Nepotism in Silicon Valley," which used my situation as a jumping-off point to explore broader issues of elitism in the industry. Without naming names, the article referenced similar stories from others who had faced discrimination based on their backgrounds rather than their abilities. Former associates of the Morris family began reaching out privately with their own stories. A former Pinnacle employee described how Jackson had systematically passed over qualified candidates from state schools in favor of Ivy League graduates with family connections. A one-time friend of Amanda's shared how she had been excluded from their social circle after losing family wealth in a financial downturn. One particularly surprising message came from Elaine Morris's former assistant, who wrote, "Mrs. Morris saw your post, and while she would never say this publicly, she wanted me to tell you she believes you did the right thing. There is a reason she has her own separate charitable foundation that focuses on educational access for underprivileged students." Public sentiment had shifted dramatically. What the Morris family had intended as a whisper campaign against me had backfired into a much louder conversation about privilege and exclusion in tech. Industry publications were suddenly examining hiring practices and social dynamics that had long been accepted as normal. I learned from industry contacts that Pinnacle's board of directors had expressed concern about the negative publicity, particularly as they were preparing for a new round of funding. Jackson was reportedly furious, but constrained by advisors who insisted that any further action against me would only make things worse. Rather than focusing on revenge, I threw myself into my new position at Horizon. The team was collaborative and genuinely valued my input. For the first time, I felt evaluated purely on merit rather than pedigree. The accessibility project we developed went on to win an industry award for innovation 6 months later, which felt like vindication of everything I had been working toward. 8 months after our breakup, I received an email from Amanda. Unlike her previous messages, this one was neither accusatory nor dramatically apologetic. It was subdued, almost formal, Zachary. I have been reflecting deeply on my behavior and the pain I caused you. There is no excuse for how I treated you, or the things I said and allowed to be said about you. My actions reflected profound character flaws that I am now working to address. I am not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I simply want to acknowledge the harm I caused and take full responsibility for it. You deserved a partner who valued and respected you for who you are, and I failed to be that person. I wish you continued success in your career and happiness in your life. Amanda, I sat with this message for several days before responding with a brief acknowledgement. I did not need or want to reignite any connection, but there was a certain closure in accepting that she recognized the wrong she had done. In the following months, I began dating again. I met Sophia, a UX researcher, at a web accessibility conference. Born to Dominican immigrants and raised in the Bronx, she had taught herself design while working full-time to support her younger siblings. Her determination and authenticity were immediately apparent, as was her complete lack of pretension despite her remarkable talents. With Sophia, conversations flowed naturally. There were no hidden evaluations, no attempts to mold or refine each other. We simply enjoyed discovering who we were together, appreciating our differences as opportunities for growth rather than flaws to be corrected. A year after the breakup, I found myself at the annual Tech Innovation Awards ceremony as part of the Horizon team. Our accessibility project had been nominated for Social Impact Innovation of the Year. As we mingled during the pre-ceremony reception, I turned from a conversation to find myself face-to-face with Jackson and Amanda Morris. The moment stretched uncomfortably as we regarded each other. Jackson recovered first, his face settling into the controlled expression of someone preparing to dominate a negotiation. "Warner," he nodded curtly. "I hear Horizon is putting your talents to good use." "They are," I agreed simply. "Perhaps you have learned that some bridges are better left unburned," he suggested, his tone carrying a weight of implied threat that once would have intimidated me. I met his gaze steadily. "Actually, I've learned that some bridges needed to be burned, so you can build better ones." Amanda stood slightly behind her, father unable to maintain eye contact with me. She looked smaller, somehow diminished despite her designer dress and flawless appearance. I felt no satisfaction in her discomfort, only a dull recognition that the person I had once loved had never really existed. As they moved away, Sophia rejoined me, slipping her hand into mine. "So that was the infamous Morris duo," she observed. "You okay?" I realized with some surprise that I genuinely was. The encounter had left me unmoved, like running into distant acquaintances rather than people who had once occupied so much emotional space in my life. That night, our project won the award. As I stood on stage with my teammates, I caught sight of the Morris family at their premium table. Jackson was engaged in conversation, pointedly ignoring the stage, but Amanda was watching, an unreadable expression on her face. In that moment, I understood that I had not just survived their attempts to destroy me. I had emerged stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more successful than I would have been had I continued trying to fit into their world. The journey from devastation to this moment of professional recognition had been painful, but it had stripped away any remaining doubts about my worth. I no longer needed validation from people who measured value by pedigree rather than character and contribution. Standing there with my talented teammates being recognized for work that would make technology more accessible for millions of users, I felt a profound sense of peace. The worst betrayal of my life had ultimately led me to my best path forward, to people who valued me for exactly who I was. Sometimes life breaks your heart so it can heal into something stronger. The cracks let in light that illuminates truths you might otherwise never have seen. Have you ever stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to back down? How did it change your life path? Share your experience in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys. Your support means everything as we build this community of authentic storytelling. Thank you for joining me today. And remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's measuring stick.